Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I recently used to get back into the top 3 with on the arena ladder, after tanking my rank a little bit, trying some brews that didn't end up working out, unfortunately. Also, if you want to try the list out for yourself, there'll be an importable deck list down in the description. But anyway, with that out of the way, this is my current build of Auras in Historic. Now, Auras wasn't an archetype I was massively interested in returning to post-BNR, because obviously with the BNR, I think the biggest winners were the very highly interactive decks like Dimir Frog and Jund Midrange, for example. And those are two really tough matchups for Auras. So even though Auras didn't get hit, or it's one of the pre-existing top tier decks that didn't get hit by the BNR, the rise of the interactive decks made me feel like Auras really wasn't that well positioned. But with the recent rise of Food Chain, I was very interested in returning to an archetype that could feasibly main deck enter the battlefield hate, because I feel like ETB hate is so good against a ton of decks in the format right now. Against Food Chain, I think it's the best form of hate because it not only shuts off the combo, but it also shuts off their backup plan, whether they're on humans or goblins. I think it's good against Jund because it shuts off Pyrogoyf, which is their main way of closing the game out, as well as stuff like Fear of Missing Out. I think it's great against Affinity because it shuts off Krang, Thought Monitor, Kappa Cannoneer, Emery. Is great against Devotion because it shuts off Outland Liberator and Kiora and a bunch of other their ETBs. It shuts off Yorg. There's so many decks in the format right now, mainly the non-control decks, where ETB hate was good, and Auras definitely felt like the best positioned deck to be able to do that. Now, I'm not going to go over the core of the deck because I've already made multiple videos on Auras, and honestly, the core of the deck is still very much the same as it was when I posted my original video like a year and a half ago, so I'll have a link to that down in the description if you want a bit more detail on how the deck works if you've not faced it before. But in this video, I'm mainly going to be focused on the new updates, addressing the cards that I'm running, some new innovations, and some cards that I'm not running as well. Quickly, I also want to talk about the ratios in the deck, because I have tinkered with that a little bit recently, and I'm still pretty adamant that the ratios I had in the original video were the way to go. I think it is really important, probably more now than ever, to be running 16 creatures that you're happy to put Auras on. I don't include Mother and Giver of Runes in this, that I'll talk about a little bit later, but in this we've got Forest Sentinel, Doorkeeper Thrull, Spirit Dancer, and Light Paws, and I think having 16 creatures is super important, especially with the prominence of discard spells right now, because having 16 creatures really maximizes your chances of having one in your opening hand, meaning you don't have to mulligan as much, which makes you less vulnerable to discard spells. But additionally, it also increases your chances of having 2 of them, which is a really big deal, first of all in the face of discard spells, but also just in the face of spot removal in general. So with discard spells being everywhere, I think it's super important to have 16 creatures that you're happy to put Auras on. And then additionally, I also think it's really important in a list like this to have at least 12 1-mana plays as well, because oftentimes with this deck, you're spending your turn 2 to cast your main creature, and then you're not really getting going until turn 3. So not having a turn 1 play really, makes the curve way more heavy on your turn 2 and 3, which is really awkward in this sort of list. So for me, it was really important to have, Esper Sentinel, Thought Partition, and Demonic Ruckus as turn 1 plays as well. So for me, in terms of ratios, you really want 16 creatures. Then I like having a 4-of way to protect your creatures as well, that gives you another turn 1 play, and then the rest of the list is obviously going to be lands and auras. So I'm going to start off here by talking about the new creature innovations in the list. So like I said, I was really interested in running ETB hate in the main deck. Now in the past, typically Hushbringer has been the card of choice here, but I think post BNR, the ability to shut off death triggers really isn't that relevant anymore, right? Ajani obviously got banned, and that was one of the main reasons why people were running Hushbringer. Now post BNR, I think the only 2 decks where shutting off death triggers is really relevant is Yawgmoth and Hardened Scales, which are, viable decks, but I barely see them. They're really not that common, so I don't think shutting off death triggers is really that important anymore. Obviously, the lifelink on Hushbringer is an upside as well, but for the most part, it's not that important, right? We have Sheltered by Ghosts if we do need lifelink, and for the most part, we are the aggressive deck, so the lifelink on Hushbringer doesn't really feel that relevant. Whereas Doorkeeper Thrull, which is the card I'm running instead, giving it flash is really important in the face of counterspells, and I think counterspells are way more prominent right now. Obviously, you've got Dimir Frog, but there's also Azorius and Jeskai control that I've seen an increase of, and there's other control decks like Izzet running, Flame of Anor in the Chorus package. So I feel like Doorkeeper Thrull having flash allows you to play around counter spells way more easily, allows you to dodge sorcery spells more easily, and also if you are against an a deck reliant on ETBs, then you can kind of force the opponent to waste an extra turn, because if you just run out Hushbringer on turn 2, the opponent's not going to play an ETB creature into that, right? Whereas if you have Doorkeeper Thrull, they're much more likely to waste their turn casting a Juggernaut Peddler, casting a Recruiter of the Guard, casting an Emery, and then you can kind of ambush them with the Doorkeeper Thrull, which is a nice upside. And then secondly, the ability to shut off artifact ETBs is really good against Affinity as well, which I think is a much more powerful and prominent deck than any of the decks with death triggers, right? It shuts off Kappa Cannoneer getting any counters, so Kappa Cannoneer just remains a 4/4 forever. It prevents putting any counters on Drix Interlacer, which is one of their most powerful cards as well. So I feel like Doorkeeper Thrull is just the better ETB hate card than Hushbringer right now. So not a massive change, but definitely provides you some upsides in the current metagame. And then the other creature I want to talk about here is Adanto Vanguard, because like I said, one of the main issues I had with Auras as an archetype was that it was just really weak into the black interactive decks like Dimir and Jund, and having Adanto Vanguard post sideboard has felt so good. Honestly, there have been some situations where I faced a lot of Dimir and Jund where I wanted to cut Doorkeeper Thrull and have Adanto Vanguard in the main deck, but like I said, I feel like there's so many decks in the format right now where ETB hate is relevant that I think it's better to have Doorkeeper Thrull in the main deck and then Adanto Vanguard in the sideboard. But this card has single-handedly massively improved my matchup against Dimir and Jund. I've got a positive win rate against both of them now. Having said that, I'm not sure that Dimir and Jund become favourable matchups just off the back of Adanto Vanguard itself, but it has really, really improved the matchups for me because, especially against the black decks, the only real pieces of interaction that they run that can remove this is Dismember, which I really haven't seen much of recently. I think that the main reason to run Dismember in the past was to stop the land hoses, but I think people have already adjusted their mana base to account for those, so the land hoses are typically mainly sideboard cards now from my experience, so Dismember hasn't really seen much play. And then Toxic Deluge is obviously a sideboard card that is run, but again, it's a sideboard card, you're not going to see it game one, and you can obviously outscale it quite quickly with Auras if you apply pressure and then grow your creatures. Oftentimes the opponent can't pay the life to actually kill the Adanto Vanguard. So against the rest of their interaction, obviously, you can just give it indestructible against Fatal Push, Snuff Out, Abrupt Decay. The majority of their interaction from the black decks really struggle to deal with this. It can just freely block Barrow-Goyf. It can't get killed by Pyro-Goyf either. So Adanto Vanguard has single-handedly massively improved the matchups against Dimir and Jund from my experience. Then next up I want to talk about Thought Partition. So again, like I said, I really think it's important to run this kind of extra 1-mana cards to ensure that we have 1-mana plays in this deck. Typically in the past, this has been the slot for Mother or Giver of Runes, or Thoughtseize if you're splashing black. Quickly want to address that actually. I'm not running Mardu anymore because, first of all, I feel like the Juggernaut Peddler slot is now better with ETB hate cards, and the two main reasons to splash black in the past have been Thoughtseize and Juggernaut Peddler, and if we're running Doorkeeper Thrull over Juggernaut Peddler, the only reason to splash black would be for Thoughtseize, and the Mardu build has significant costs in terms of the mana base, especially whilst Harbinger and Magus of the Moon are still seeing some play, even if it's only out the sideboard. So for me, running Mardu is super risky whilst Harbinger is still seeing play because it's impossible to not get hosed by that. And then secondly, I also feel like with Thought Partition, the addition of Thoughtseize isn't really as important anymore. Now, Thought Partition is a fair bit worse than Thoughtseize because the opponent can still ramp into the card that you make 5 mana, and they can obviously still discard it for value or whatnot, but I feel like it's not that significantly worse that it's worth splashing an extra colour for. And the reason why I'm running Thought Partition over Mother of Runes, which I think is the best other option, right? I don't think Giver is correct to run anymore because Eldrazi really isn't seeing that much play. I think Mother of Runes is much better, especially in the face of the black interactive decks, but I think Thought Partition is better right now because, first of all, it's much better against combo, which is very important with the rise of Food Chain, right? Being able to preemptively get rid of Food Chain is much better than just running out Mother of Runes and then getting comboed. I think with counterspells being very popular right now, using Thought Partition on 1 to get rid of the opponent's counterspell, especially if you're going second to then clear the way for your 2-drop is important, whereas Mother, if you run out Mother and then the opponent has a counterspell and you try and run out a Core Spirit Dancer or a Light Pause on turn 2, if it gets hit by a counterspell, you're then reliant on Mother of Runes to win the game, which is really bad. You don't really want to be putting auras on Mother of Runes. Not to mention board sweepers have also been on the rise recently. Toxic Deluge, Divine Purge, Culling Ritual, all seeing play out the sideboard as well. So Thought Partition delaying those is a really big deal as well. So Mother of Runes is obviously better if the opponent doesn't have a piece of removal immediately, but for the most part, right, Mother of Runes, especially against the interactive decks, is going to be removal check, right? If the opponent has a Fatal Push or Snuff Out, Mother of Runes baits that out, and then it clears the way for your 2-drop to survive. And Thought Partition basically does the same thing, right? If the opponent does have a Fatal Push in hand, you can Thought Partition, make the Fatal Push 5 mana to clear the way for your 2-drop. The only real situations where Mother is better is if the opponent doesn't have immediate interaction. If it survives, it then makes all of the opponent's interaction for the rest of the game inactive, which is obviously nice. And then obviously if you're up against a deck where there's a board stall and they all have creatures of the same colour, you can give protection from that colour to enable you to attack through, but Auras is pretty good at attacking through board stalls anyway, through stuff like Demonic Ruckus and Griff Griff's Boon and stuff like that. So I don't feel like that side of Mother is that important. So because Thought Partition is better against combo, counterspells, and sweepers, whilst still also baiting out spot removal, I feel like Partition is better than Mother of Runes personally for those reasons, if that makes sense. Then in terms of the mana base, nothing too flashy to talk about here really. I do think it's important to run the basics and Prismatic Vistas so that we don't get hosed by stuff like Harbinger, which does unfortunately mean we have to run the basic Mountain, which is kind of clunky when the vast majority of our cards are white, but I think that's kind of a necessary evil to avoid getting hosed by the Harbinger and Magus of the Moon. Then in terms of the sideboard, like I said, rest of the main deck, there isn't really too much to talk about other than maybe Sentinel's Eyes over All That Glitters. I just feel like right now, this is kind of the Boros equivalent of Kaya's Ghost form, where it gives you a very repeatable aura from the graveyard if the opponent is interacting with you, right? It just gives you a way to ensure that you constantly have auras to play, even if your creatures are getting killed. All That Glitters is obviously nice with Light Pause, especially if you need to force through extra damage, but there's been very few games where All That Glitters would have made the difference between winning and losing, whereas there have been way more games where the opponent is running, a bunch of interaction, and I've been able to keep repeatedly using Sentinel's Eyes to ensure that I'm getting value off the creatures that I do draw. So for me, I feel like Sentinel's Eyes is more important than All That Glitters, but if you wanted to swap that, it's not that much of a difference in my opinion. And then moving on to the sideboard, like I said, Adanto Vanguard's so important against the Dimir and Jund decks. Just any deck that is reliant on damage-based removal, this is a really good way to just ensure that we can freely just keep putting auras on without worrying about our opponent's instant speed interaction. Seam Rip is very important against, just decks where you need early interaction like the Mirror Match, or against Izzet Wizards where they can potentially race you. And also I find this better than Thought Partition against non-interactive decks that are ramping early, so decks like Eldrazi, decks like Mono Green Devotion. I find this better to slow the opponent's proactive game plan down, especially because one of the weaknesses of Thought Partition is the opponent can ramp into whatever you make 5 mana, so against those sorts of ramp decks like Devotion or Eldrazi, making a card 5 mana isn't as bad for them because they can obviously just accelerate into it. And then we've got a couple of copies of Pithing Needle. This is definitely the flex slot, so if you wanted to run something else, this is probably the slot to run it, but I still feel like Pithing Needle is very useful against decks that are reliant on a key combo card to go off, whether that's a Yawgmoth or a Shifting Woodland, for example. And then finally, 4 copies of Rest in Peace. This is another kind of innovation that I've added recently, and this is mainly for the Jund matchup. I feel like the Jund matchup is so tricky if you don't have a Adanto Vanguard, and typically how I board against Jund is I cut the Doorkeeper Thralls for Adanto Vanguards, and then I cut the Thought Partition for Rest in Peace, so we still have the 16 creatures and we still have a very high density of auras. That does mean that we have fewer turn 1 plays, but Rest in Peace is so good against Jund. It shuts off Jostle, it shuts off Fear of Missing Out, it shuts off Croxer, it shuts off Detective's Phoenix, but more importantly than anything else, it makes all of their Goyfs 0/1s as well. Now, 4 copies might seem excessive, but finding the first copy of this against Jund makes an absolute night and day difference to the matchup. If you have this in play, their proactive game plan is so much worse, and honestly, drawing 2 copies is actually pretty good in the face of Abrupt Decay as well. Now, there is obviously the downside. Some Jund builds are running Culling Ritual, so having 2 Rest in Peace in play into that is a little bit risky, but for the most part, I really like having 4 Rest in Peace because, like I said, if you can resolve the first copy of this, their proactive game plan is so much worse. So having a Adanto Vanguard and Rest in Peace against Jund massively improves that matchup. Having Thought Partition and Adanto Vanguard against Dimir feels like it massively improves that matchup as well. And then, like I said, I think Doorkeeper Thrall, the ETB hate that this provides in the main deck, is really good against a lot of the metagame right now as well. So that's the deck overall. If you've got any questions or comments, definitely let me know below, and I'll be very interested in chatting to you about that there. I've just got some gameplay next so you guys can see the deck in action. Either way, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Big up. Okay, so we're going second here. And obviously can't keep a no-lander. And then, wow, no creatures either, so we've got to go down to 5. And then, I think I'm going to put Griff's Boon and Ethereal Armor back, because if we draw our 3rd land, we can potentially go Spirit Dancer and protect it with Shard Mage's Rescue. I think I'm going to lead on the Sunbaked Canyon here. Maybe we're supposed to crack the Vista first, though, just to thin the deck out a little bit, but wow, looks like we're against Jund as well, which is a pretty difficult matchup, especially game 1. Post-sideboard with Adanto Vanguard and Rest in Peace, it does get quite a bit better. Okay, Doorkeeper Thrall's a nice pickup here, because if the opponent does jam Pyrogoyf, we can obviously flash in the Doorkeeper Thrall to shut the ETB off. Same sort of thing with Fear of Missing Out, but the main thing here is that we can run out Doorkeeper Thrall without playing into interaction, and then hopefully next turn, if the opponent doesn't have a Thoughtseize, which it doesn't look like they do in the graveyard, which is pretty big, then we can go Core Spirit Dancer plus hold up Shard Mage's Rescue. So they still have the Ignoble Hierarch that they can get back off the Jar Seal, which is a bit annoying because they also have the Malevolent Rumble for next turn. But that does mean that they can't reuse the Fatal Push from the graveyard now, which is a pretty big deal. So here we're going to flash in the Doorkeeper Thrull, and then obviously it depends what we draw, but I think almost certainly our turn next turn is just going to be play a land, play a Spirit Dancer, and just hold up the Shard Mage's Rescue, and basically force the opponent to have 2 pieces of interaction here. Okay, Thought Partition's an interesting top deck, but I think it's better to just hold up the Shard Mage's Rescue here. Starts drawing cards off the Core Spirit Dancer, forces them to have 2 pieces of interaction, and is also a surprise as well, right? There's more of a chance that they'll tap out for a bigger card like a Pyrogoyf, even if they have 2 bits of removal. So they do have an Arena of Glory, which is kind of rough if they have Barrogoyf, which, okay, it looks like they do here. I think we've just got to let the damage through on this, which is a little bit annoying. See what else they've got here. I mean, they've still got the Malevolent Rumble, so it wouldn't surprise me if they did that first and then went to main phase 2, seeing what they hit off it. So use Rumble off the Jar Seal, see what they hit here. Okay, Fear of Missing Out is their only threat that they find off that, which is obviously not going to do as much with the Doorkeeper Thrull in play, although it can, obviously, if they get Delirium, still have a decent impact. Unfortunately, I think we've got to let them mill with the Barrogoyf, but again, I'm not as worried about this here because we do have the Doorkeeper Thrull in play. If we didn't, then I'd be worried about Pyrogoyf just doming us or taking out the Spirit Dancer. Oh wow, okay, they've got Croxer as well, which is, you know, interesting to know about because that is one possible weakness of the Doorkeeper Thrull, especially when they've got Arena of Glory, right? If we have Doorkeeper Thrull in play and they cast Croxer from hand, it just stays in play as a creature, and they can give it haste off the Arena of Glory. So kind of happy that they milled it over rather than having it in hand here. But yeah, we're in a difficult spot here because... Oh, okay, I thought they were going to play the second Fear of Missing Out there, but... And we could have obviously used the Shard Mage's Rescue here, but I think getting rid of this Barrogoyf is going to be so important here, right? We can use the Spirit Dancer, get rid of the Barrogoyf, and then even if the opponent has removal spell and can pay for the ward too, we still have the Shard Mage's Rescue to protect it, which is pretty big. And then holding everything back basically prevents the Fear of Missing Out from really doing too much here as well. So surprisingly, we're in a decent, well, an okay spot here considering, you know, it's typically a bad matchup game 1 and they also had a pretty good start themselves. Okay, there's another Jar Seal, so they can obviously use the Fatal Push to try and take out the Spirit Dancer and they have mana to pay for the ward, but they can only do that once, right? If they have a second Fatal Push here, then that's not going to be good enough because then they're not going to be able to pay for the ward twice. Actually, no, they have the spawn token as well, but they would need an extra mana to pay for Fatal Push, a second Fatal Push either way. So now we can go for the Shard Mage's Rescue, protect the Spirit Dancer, and then we can start attacking with it next turn as well. It is a bit annoying they've got the spawn token. Wow, opponent just scoops it up. That was a surprise. I mean, getting game 1 against Jund is huge because it's typically a bad matchup game 1 and then does improve post-sideboard from my experience. So here, to keep the ratios of the deck in order, I'm going to cut the Thought Partition for Rest in Peace and Doorkeeper Thrull for Adanto Vanguard, which does mean that we now only have 8 1-mana plays, which is not great for our curve, but Rest in Peace is such an impactful card, and especially in this matchup, it's the highest density of discard spells out of any matchup, really, and so I think out of all the decks we face, this is the most important to keep the 16 creatures intact so that, you know, we don't have to mulligan as much for a start, which means we're less vulnerable to Thoughtseize and stuff like that. But we're also more likely to have an opening hand with 2 threats in, which is pretty big. So keeping 16 creatures that we're happy to put auras on is a big deal. And then I don't think you can really cut auras either, right? It's very important to have a high density of auras, or you'll just end up in spots where you have Spirit Dancers and Light Paws, but nothing to do with them, which is a really big issue as well. So even though we do have fewer 1-drops, I feel like Rest in Peace has such a big impact in this matchup because it shuts off so much of their proactive game plan that it's worth it. We also saw that the opponent was on Fear of Missing Out and Croxer, so I think their specific build is going to be even more vulnerable to Rest in Peace than some others. So yeah, pretty happy with how we sideboarded here and very happy to have kind of nixed game 1 in what is usually a tricky matchup. Okay, so post-sideboard, I mean, they are likely to have more spot removal and potentially board sweepers against us as well, but we get Rest in Peace, which massively hurts their proactive game plan. And they don't have that many outs to it either. Abrupt Decay and Culling Ritual are the main two ones that I see. Wow, this hand, I mean, if we had a second land, it's a snap keep. I'm still going to risk it though, because if we draw a second land here, we have such a high threat density. Okay, well, thankfully we do. We have such a high threat density that we should be able to play through their early interaction. So I'm going to run out the Adanto Vanguard first here because, you know, if they have destruction-based interaction, which represents most of what they've got outside of, I guess, Toxic Deluge, Shieldred's Edict, and Dismember are the only ones that can really answer it. Everything else Vanguard can play through, including Culling Ritual, which is quite a big deal, especially when we've brought in Rest in Peace. So running out the Adanto Vanguard here should help blank their early interaction, and then oh wow, opponent just goes for the Adanto, goes for the Abrupt Decay. I mean, obviously that's a mistake from their part, unless they just want to cut us off life total, right? That is a way that you can eventually take out the Vanguard if you just keep using removal spells on it, whittle your life total down. So here, I think I'm just going to jam the Rest in Peace because it is so good against their proactive game plan. And then I'm going to put Grifspoon on the Adanto Vanguard again because I feel like if they had an answer to it, they would have used it last time instead of Abrupt Decay. So giving it flying does immediately put them on a pretty decent clock. And then we've obviously got the, you know, the 4 creatures as backup for when we do draw more auras. Oh, they do have Culling Ritual, so we do lose the Rest in Peace immediately and the Grifspoon, which is a bit annoying. And the Grifspoon doesn't go to the graveyard because of the Rest in Peace in play as well. But thankfully the Adanto Vanguard does survive, which is pretty nice. So here, I think I'm going to run out the Light Pause because if this does survive, it's going to represent the fastest clock. And it's also, it makes it easier to put the auras on the Vanguard itself as well, right? We're not missing out on the extra buff that we would on the core Spirit Dancer because Light Pause puts the auras on itself. There is maybe an argument to going for core Spirit Dancer first because we have it in multiples, but I feel like when we want to put auras on the Vanguard, it's probably best to go Light Pause first. Okay, there is Pyrogoyfs, so that does take out the Light Pause here. And they are starting to build up the graveyard again after getting rid of the Rest in Peace, which is a bit of a concern. Wow, and we don't draw any more auras, which is a bit annoying. And we can't attack either because the Pyrogoyf grew from the Light Pause dying. But, you know, if we draw an aura off the top here, we're in really good shape. Again, if the opponent has another sweeper, we might be in trouble. But, you know, looks like they're on Culling Ritual rather than Toxic Deluge. I guess they could be on both technically, but typically it's usually one or the other from my experience. So if they do have another Culling Ritual, then at least the Vanguard will survive. Yeah, okay, there's a second Culling Ritual. So it looks like that's what they're mainly on here. But obviously they can't pick it up off the Rumble. Interesting they go for a tap land. Wow, and Arena of Glory. So this is maybe Barragoyf, maybe Fear of Missing Out. Okay, it is the Barragoyf. So thankfully we can block the Barragoyf and pay for life to keep the Vanguard alive. But now we're entering the territory where that extra 4 life that we took off the Abrupt Decay earlier might be adding up. So that play makes a little bit more sense now, I guess. So yeah, blocking like this to deny them the card off the mill. And if we can draw, you know, a couple of Ethereal Armors in a row here, we could actually just win the game out of nowhere. But, you know, we really need to find an aura off the top. Ideally, something like a Sheltered by Ghosts. See what we draw here. Oh, wow. Okay, that's pretty perfect. So now we can go Spirit Dancer, Sheltered by Ghosts on the Adanto Vanguard to draw 2. Then we can get rid of the Barragoyf. And unfortunately, they do have the Spawn, which can deny us the lifelink. And we can't pay the 4 life to keep the Vanguard alive anymore either. So maybe it was a mistake to put this on the Vanguard rather than the Spirit Dancer. But now we have the Shard Mage's Rescue. That kind of flips that on its head a little bit. But I'm actually going to take the Pyrogoyf here because at 3 life, I'm worried about them just playing another Goyf and doming us. Whereas at least we have Core Spirit Dancers here as a way to chump block. There is Jarsoul, and they do have Fatal Push, which they obviously can use on the Vanguard here. But thankfully we drew the Shard Mage's Rescue, so we can draw 2 off the Spirit Dancers and keep the Vanguard alive here. So we Shard Mages the Adanto Vanguard. Draw 2. And then we might actually be in a decent spot next turn if we can keep the auras flowing, right? So we'll obviously have to throw away one of these Spirit Dancers here, which is a bit annoying. But if we can draw another aura off the top, which is why it's so important, like these sorts of spots are why it's so important to have a high density of auras still in the deck. Okay, we didn't draw an aura, but we do draw a Rest in Peace, which is pretty huge because it shuts off Barrow Goyf and Jarsel as well. The Jarsel is still a bit of a concern though because, you know, we're at 3 life and it's a 3/3, so we're forced to block. We don't have the 4 life available to pay for the Vanguard here. But I think we probably should start attacking with the Vanguard to, first of all, get rid of that spawn token so that future ones can, you know, future attacks can actually start gaining us life back, especially now the Barrow Goyf has been shrunk. Maybe we're supposed to go down to 1 and put Lurrus into hand here, but I think absolute worst case scenario, if we don't draw auras next turn, we can still put Lurrus into our hand and cast it. So yeah, opponent blocks with the spawn token and sacks it to deny us the life gain. So as long as we can survive this turn, I think we're actually not in a bad spot here. Obviously, there are a number of cards that can win it for the opponent. Culling Ritual off the top would be really brutal here. But it looks like they don't have it. I guess they do have Arena of Glory for the Gigantha here, though. Which does force us to throw away both creatures here. But we do, again, we have the Lurrus worst case scenario, which will put us back to 6. And we draw Demonic Ruckus, which is quite interesting. But again, I think we're forced to use Lurrus here. Cast the Lurrus, and then I think we can attack, or we kind of need to start attacking with the Vanguard here to start gaining life. And then we can plot the Demonic Ruckus for next turn. And then, assuming they don't have a way to remove Rest in Peace and get Barrow Goyf online here. Okay, there is a Rumble. We'll see what they hit. Okay, they hit a Peatland, which they can crack to draw. But yeah, I think if they attack with both, I'm kind of tempted to trade with the Jarsel here, rather than chumping the Gigantha. And then I think we can potentially race, because next turn we can put the Ruckus on, which will buff the Adanto Vanguard. It obviously gets a buff of +2/+0 when it attacks as well. So the lifelink off Sheltered by Ghosts is putting in a lot of work here. Okay, they do attack with both. So I think it makes the most sense to trade with the Jarsel here. That'll put us down to 6. But then we've got, you know, a pretty powerful Adanto Vanguard gaining us a bunch of life back as well. And now we do actually have the life to pay for the 4, you know, to make it indestructible if we need. And because we gave it Menace, it means the opponent can't just chump block with the spawn token and sack it like they did earlier as well. They have to block with another creature, which will guarantee us the lifelink, which is pretty big. I think it's definitely correct to wait until main phase 2 to play the Sentinel here, just to give them less information for their blocks. But yeah, unless the opponent can find another Culling Ritual, which they've already gone through 2, I think we're actually in a really good spot now. Or I guess Abrupt Decay for the Rest in Peace would also do it, but we still have the advantage on the board even in that situation, so... So we'll see what the opponent drew here. Wow, no attacks with the Gigantha is great for us as well. And now we can freely attack again. We don't have First Strike off Ethereal Armor, but if they do choose to block with the Gigantha, we can just give Adanto Indestructible. Which it looks like they're going to do. So we can just pay the 4 life, give it Indestructible. And then, don't think it really matters because the Barrow Goyf is unlikely to grow. I feel like if they had an answer for Rest in Peace, they would have used it already. And now I'm going to hold on to this Prismatic Vista as a bluff for Shard Mage's Rescue. And wow, the opponent scoops it up. So that top deck Sheltered by Ghost was pretty lucky, but Adanto Vanguard and Rest in Peace putting in work there. Okay, so we're going second here. And, I mean, I don't love keeping one-landers, but I think on the draw with a turn 1 Esper Sentinel, I think is not a bad keep, you know, especially when we've got, you know, 3 threats, so we should be able to play through early interaction and Ethereal Armor plus protection. And we do immediately draw the second land, which is really nice. So, against the blue deck, definitely going to run Sentinel out. I mean, we'd run Sentinel out on 1 anyway, but if we can get an extra card out of this, it'll be really big. Oh, Thought Scout. Okay, so against Izzet Phoenix, which Esper Sentinel is really solid against them, but they can obviously have pretty explosive starts. We'll see if they give us a card here. Okay, no, slightly slower start, which is good to see. No Manamorphose for the turn 2 Phoenix, which is great. And I'd love to draw a third land. I think if we draw a third land, I'm going to go for the Doorkeeper Thrull. If we don't, I think I'm just going to run out of the Light Pause instead. Right, if we draw a third land, then we can go Doorkeeper Thrull, and then next turn, on turn 3, we can go Light Pause and hold up Shard Mage's Rescue. But because we haven't found the third land yet, I think it makes sense to just go for the Light Pause here. There is obviously a decent chance that they could have a removal spell for the Light Pause, but, you know, if we wait and then we don't draw a third land, we'd be in the exact same position next turn anyway, so I think it makes sense to just go for it straight away. They do have a single Phoenix in the yard, so hopefully they don't have a red source into something like, you know, Chain Lightning or... I don't even know what other burn spells Phoenix ran. Okay, there is the Chain Lightning. So we do lose the Light Pause, but they don't have a third spell, which is absolutely huge. And now we draw the third land. So now we can go for Light Pause and hold up the Shard Mage's Rescue, which is really nice. Because even if they do have a crazy turn, I think Light Pause should be able to outscale whatever they do. They don't tend to have too much instant speed interaction in the main deck from what I've seen at the very least. Okay, there's another Faithless Looting. Wouldn't surprise me if they paid the 1 here. Oh, wow, they let us draw a card. Okay. I mean, I'm pretty happy about that as well. But it does make me worry they might have an explosive start here. Wow, they're discarding 2 lands. I guess they could also bring back the Demi-Lich potentially, but we can go over the top of that pretty easily. Okay, there is Manamorphose. So they can, at worst, go Manamorphose into looting from the graveyard, even if they don't have something else, which will be good enough to bring back at least that 1 Phoenix they've discarded. Obviously, if they draw another Phoenix, they can discard it to the looting from the graveyard. But I'm kind of surprised they didn't pay the 1. I guess, yeah, this sequence they do need the 3rd mana for the Faithless Looting. So we'll see if they drew another Phoenix here. Well, they didn't. So they only get back 1 Phoenix, and they didn't get Demi-Lich back from the graveyard. So could have gone a lot worse for us there. And they do attack. I mean, I'm going to Shard Mage's Rescue hit anyway, so I might as well do it before they have an access to another red mana. If we get Griff's Boon here, I don't think it's enough for us to block, right? I mean, we're obviously going to get Ethereal Armor anyway, so might as well just go for that. But yeah, Griff's Boon isn't actually enough, but... I feel like we should be good enough for lethal here with the 3 1-mana auras, right? Because we get 2 Ethereal Armors, we get basically every single 1-mana aura out of the deck. We get the Griff's Boon, and we get the Sentinel's Eyes. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. So, post-sideboard, I feel pretty confident about this matchup because we've got Rest in Peace, which is really good against what they're doing. So, Rest in Peace... Again, I think whenever I bring in Rest in Peace, I always cut Thought Partition, which I don't love because it does mean we only have 8 1-mana plays. But, you know, in the matchups where we bring in Rest in Peace, Jund, Phoenix, Reanimator, Shifting Woodland, it is such a good card that I feel like it's worth messing up the curve a little bit to bring it in. And again, I really want 16 creatures to avoid having to mulligan too much and to be able to play through spot removal, which is going to be more common post-sideboard. And you really want a high density of auras as well. Or you just end up in situations where you have, you know, a 2-2 Spirit, Light Pause or a 0-2 Spirit Dancer and nothing to do with it. And also, I think Spirit Dancer itself becomes a lot worse if you don't have a high density of auras because you rely on being able to chain them together. And if you don't have a high density, you're just going to draw into other lands or creatures or whatever. So, yeah, definitely feel confident about this matchup post-sideboard because Rest in Peace is going to be really good against them. And slightly too many lands, but, you know, I don't think we can scoff at a hand with Sentinel against the spell deck and Light Pause as well. So, yeah, almost certainly just going to crack the Vista for Light Pause on turn 1. And then, obviously it depends on what we draw, but I imagine we'll just jam Light Pause. You know, if we draw Shard Mage's Rescue, then there's potentially an argument to holding off on it. Oh, Shelter by Ghost is pretty nice here, because if they have a non-Phoenix creature that they play out here, there's a chance that we might want to exile it with the Shelter by Ghost, and then giving Esper Sentinel +1/+0 to make it more difficult to play around and Ward 2 is a pretty big deal. Wow, Thing in the Ice. So I think I'm tempted to just go for the Sheltered by Ghosts here because, you know, like I said, it gets rid of the Thing in the Ice, which is a problematic card for us in this matchup. Looks like they might have Force of Negation here, though. Okay, they do have the Force, which is kind of scary because, I mean, we do get to draw a card off the Sentinel, and we do find another Sheltered by Ghost, but if they have 3 1-mana spells, they could potentially flip the Thing in the Ice this turn, which is scary. I mean, thankfully, because we have the Sheltered by Ghosts here, we can recast Esper Sentinel and play Shelter by Ghost to exile the Thing in the Ice, and even if they remove the Esper Sentinel, Thing in the Ice will return as the 0/4 rather than the, I think it's a 7/8 once it flips. So 2 mana Morphos is here. See if they've got a looting as well. Oh wow, they have Chain Lightning, but that I was going to say they should have gone face with that because it bounces the Esper Sentinel beforehand. So thankfully we can just do that line I was talking about, where we go Esper Sentinel into Sheltered by Ghost, get rid of the Thing in the Ice, and then even if they do have a way to get rid of the Esper Sentinel, Thing in the Ice will return as a 0/4, I think. I'm pretty sure anyway. So yeah, and especially because the opponent was missing land drops, the Sentinel is going to be big here. Although they do have another Chain Lightning, so that does draw us an extra card, but it does give the opponent back the Thing in the Ice, which can be a potential issue here. So, what do we want to do? I mean, I think we definitely want to get the Rest in Peace in play this turn so that we're not just vulnerable to Phoenixes. And I think since they've used 2 Chain Lightnings, I'm happy to run out the Light Pause here. Right, if they happen to bounce it with the Thing in the Ice, then we can just recast it. And I guess they could, you know, be boarding into more removals, so maybe that's a little risky, but we still have the Lurrus worst case scenario here, and you know, we're staring down a 0/4. We have most of their deck on lock because of Rest in Peace. So maybe it was a little greedy running out the Light Pause there, but I feel like without Hammerhand, we really want to start applying pressure here. But yeah, maybe because a lot of their interaction is sorcery speed, it was maybe worth holding on to Light Pause. But again, if they hadn't had the Chain Lightning, it would have been a much better play. Wow, opponent just keeps up. Looks like they probably struggled to beat Rest in Peace there, so we got there nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yep, slightly too many lands, but I think we got to keep this one right. Turn 1 Ruckus into turn 2 Spirit Dancer, especially on the play, is a decent start regardless of what we're up against. I mean, obviously if the opponent's playing an interactive deck, then Fatal Push on the Spirit Dancer is a little bit annoying, but we at least get to draw a card from using the Demonic Ruckus, and we've obviously got Lurrus for turn 3 as a backup in the worst case scenario. But yeah, we'll see what the opponent's on here. So opponent in the tank on their turn 1. Don't know if that's a good sign or not. Unless they've disconnected, maybe? Oh no, okay. I can see them mousing over their hand. Wow, okay. Tapped artifact land. So Affinity is usually a good matchup anyway. But they are running black by the looks of things, which does make me think they might be on more interaction. Maybe they're running the black Affinity card that kills creatures. But either way, we get to get Ruckus off uncontested here. Don't have to worry about Fatal Push. So now even if they do kill the Spirit Dancer with something, if they're not on Affinity or they are running interaction like that, then we get to draw an extra card off the Ruckus as well. Okay, there's Drixen's Lacer, so almost certainly against Dimir Affinity here. Okay, and there is Emery. Thankfully, we have the Shelter by Ghost here already, which is a really big deal. See what else they got. Okay, there's Moxamba. I mean, it would be a little bit annoying if they have Metallic Rebuke here, but they would need another 0-mana artifact. Right? Because even with the Springleaf Drum that they've got now, they would need... Okay, there's another Springleaf Drum. So that should be good. Then we don't have to worry about Metallic Rebuke for this turn, which is a pretty big deal. So definitely going to lead on the Shelter by Ghost. And even though they've got Grixis Interlacer on 4, I think Emery is definitely the target to take here. Because if they have a second Grixis Interlacer, they can start looping it as well. And rather than playing Esper Sentinel, I think I'm just going to try and apply as much pressure as possible. Because the big weakness of Affinity is it doesn't tend to have that much efficient interaction at the very least, right? There's a chance they're on the Affinity black card that kills stuff, although I haven't seen that much. There's a chance they're on Aether Spellbomb, but that costs them a lot of mana to use. There's a chance they're on Sink into Stupor, but again, costs them a lot of mana to use, especially when we've got Ward on the Spirit Dancer here, so... Okay, so they crack the Grixis Interlacer, they do get to flip the Tamiya, but we can just pretty much ignore that as Aura is right. That's only really an issue if you're going wide. So plus the Tamiya, we'll see what else they've drawn here. Okay, they just keep it up, so we got there nice. So Affinity should be a pretty decent matchup. Doorkeeper Thrull is incredible here. I guess the main decision I've got to make here is whether I prefer Thought Partition or Seam Rip. And whilst Thought Partition is obviously going to be better against their counterspells, I feel like their counterspells typically rely on having stuff in play. So I think Seam Rip is better at just disrupting their early plays, which not only makes casting stuff like Metallic Rebuke more difficult, but it also cuts them off, you know, early Kappa Cannoneers, which is the only real way they can potentially race in this matchup. It cuts them off, you know, early Krangs or Thought Monitors and stuff like that as well. So I feel like Seam Rip is probably the better card than Thought Partition in this particular matchup. Especially when we're going second. On the play, I maybe think about swapping back to Thought Partition to deal with counterspells, but I think going second, we definitely want Seam Rip. So here, very, very happy to see Doorkeeper Thrull, and I think I'm going to put back one of them, right? We didn't see any destruction-based interaction. I imagine they'll mainly be on stuff like Aether Spellbomb, and so I don't think we would need a backup Doorkeeper Thrull, because that is the card I'm going to get down as early as possible here, right? Because it just shuts off so much of their powerful stuff. Like Grixis Interlacer, for example, right? It will stop them getting any more counters on it. It will stop Kappa Cannoneer growing any bigger. Okay, there's a Moxamba. So they do potentially have access to Metallic Rebuke here, which is kind of scary. We'll see. I really hope they tap out for something else. That would be ideal. Then we can just get the Doorkeeper Thrull down. So I think, again, we do want to get Doorkeeper Thrull in as early as possible, but I think I'm going to do it during the opponent's upkeep rather than now, because they could obviously draw into a counterspell. We could do it now, but the counterspell I'm worried about is Metallic Rebuke, right? Force of Negation doesn't stop Doorkeeper Thrull, neither does Machinist Dismissal, so I think it makes most sense to do it during the... Oh, I should have set stop during the opponent's upkeep. That was my bad, because now they can... you know, crack Grixis Interlacer and draw into more stuff. So I'm going to do it now. But yeah, I definitely should have set a stop during the upkeep. That was my bad. I mean, at least this will, if they don't have a counterspell, this will deny them getting any more counters on the Grixis Interlacer. I guess, yeah, they could have activated the Retrofitter Foundry. I mean, they could have done that in the upkeep anyway, but there's less chance of them doing that if they have less information about their draw steps, so... But yeah, this will make the Grixis Interlacer not get any more counters. But yeah, kind of tricky. I guess even if I had set the upkeep stuff, I think there's a decent chance they still probably activate the Retrofitter Foundry in response because they want to flip the Tamiyo here. But this should limit how explosive the rest of their deck is. Although there is another Retrofitter Foundry, so they can make another... Well, they can turn this Ornithopter into a 4/4 here, which is kind of scary. Okay, Seam Rip could be kind of useful to take out either Tamiyo or Retrofitter Foundry here. Light Pause resolves, which is a really big deal, and then no point in attacking really because, you know, it would shrink the Doorkeeper Thrull down to a 0 power creature, and they could obviously just chump with the Ornithopter and sack it in response anyway. Okay, so they plus the Tamiyo. They attack, definitely just going to let the damage through here. There is another Ornithopter and another Foundry, so they've drawn the best part of their deck that doesn't get hit by Doorkeeper Thrull, which is a little bit annoying. But Light Pause here, I feel like should just be able to go over the top. So I'm going to put the Hammer Hand on the Doorkeeper Thrull here, just in case they have any creature removal here. Or any bounce spells, potentially. And then we can kind of spread the auras between the two creatures so we're not as vulnerable to something like an Aether Spellbomb or a Sink into Stupor. And then I think I'm going to put the Ethereal Armor on the Doorkeeper Thrull. Again, trying to spread out the auras a little bit more. Okay, Machinist Dismissal. So that is a little bit annoying. We still do have the Seam Rip though, and I think for me the decision here is whether we want to take out a 4/4 or the Tamiyo. And the Tamiyo is that pretty high loyalty, right? It's 2 turns until they can ultimate it, which likely will win them the game. I mean, obviously it depends on what we've got on board. But yeah, I think at the moment I'm probably just going to use this to take out the Tamiyo because the Light Pause is going to be able to pretty much freely block their 4/4s. So I think I am more worried about the Tamiyo in this spot. And then I think we'll hold it back. We don't want to take any unnecessary damage here if we can avoid it. Although I guess they can make 3 4/4s here, right? I forgot that they could make an extra 4/4 off that 1/1 that they had as well. So maybe we're supposed to take out the 4/4 here. Maybe that was a bit of a mistake. Oh no, and they drew Aether Spellbomb. Wow, okay. That could actually just win them the game then, because we go down to 3 here, and then we don't even have enough mana to cost. Oh no. That's a disaster. That top deck Spellbomb really did us. So yeah, I think maybe we're supposed to use Seam Rip to take out the 4/4. I didn't realise that they could make a third 4/4 that same turn. But having said that, if they have a Tamiyo at 8 loyalty, I guess we could keep them off it with the Doorkeeper Thrull. But so at the very least, I think we just have to use the Doorkeeper Thrull here to exile one of them, chump block one of them, go up to 7, and then, you know, down to 3 again. Oh, sorry, I guess it would be, sorry, down to 2. But yeah, we're in trouble here. Yeah, I think looking back at it, if I'd realised that they could have made an extra 4/4 there, I'm supposed to Seam Rip the 4/4 they had in play and then just keep attacking down the Tamiyo with the Doorkeeper Thrull to keep them off the ultimate. So that was my bad. I think I have potentially thrown this game using the Seam Rip on the wrong target there. But having said that, if the opponent doesn't draw the Aether Spellbomb there, I think we're probably fine as well, so that definitely played a part in it. Wow, the 4th Retrofitter. So, I mean, I think we basically just lose this no matter what. Yeah, so that's a bit annoying. I didn't think we'd be able to lose against Affinity with a Doorkeeper Thrull in play, but Retrofitter Foundry is one of the ways they can do that. But going into Game 3, I'm pretty confident. I think this is generally a good matchup anyway, plus having Doorkeeper Thrull in the deck, you know, amplifies that even more. But yeah, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So being on the play here is really nice. And we do find the Doorkeeper Thrull plus a turn 1 Sentinel. So definitely happy to keep this for sure. I'm going to lead on the Vista Crack. Just, you know, thin our deck a little bit. Of lands anyway. And then, you know, just in case they're running anything weird like Stifle, it's best to just get it out of the way before they have mana open. Okay, they do just jam Retrofitter Foundry, which gives us a card of the Sentinel. And now I think we definitely want to main phase the Doorkeeper Thrull to play around Metallic Rebuke. And then we can kind of get off to the races next turn. Okay, there is Emery, but Doorkeeper Thrull shuts that off, which is really nice. And then I think we just want to load up the auras on the Esper Sentinel here, even though we have flying off the Doorkeeper Thrull, because, you know, they rely on non-creature spells. Oh, they are running Fatal Push, which is interesting, but we do have the Shard Mage's Rescue here, which is obviously really big in this sort of situation. Wow, yeah, okay, opponent just keeps it up, so we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And again, slightly too many lands, but I think I'm happy to keep this one, right? We've got Thought Partition on 1, Doorkeeper Thrull on 2, and then hopefully we can draw some more auras. Okay, Spirit Dance is a nice pickup. We'll go Thought Partition, see what the opponent's running here. Oh, Grixis, interesting. I mean, we've definitely got to take the Shieldred's Edict here, right? Illuminating Lash we don't mind about as much because it's sorcery speed, meaning if we can, you know, grow our creature quickly enough, we're not as worried. Doorkeeper Thrull also shuts off Pyrogoyf, which is pretty nice. So ship it back here, going to flash in the Doorkeeper Thrull during their end step, which, you know, helps us dodge the Illuminating Lash, which is a pretty big deal. See if they run out the Barragoyf here or not, though. Okay, they attack with the Tamiyo. Wow, no third land is really huge for us. I mean, I'm kind of surprised they didn't crack the clue. Maybe they have an instant speed card they drew here. Or maybe they just want to represent Counterspell or something. Or maybe they do have Counterspell. Okay, they do have Counterspell. Interesting. So now we know they've got Illuminating Lash. We definitely need to go Spirit Dancer plus Hammerhand here to grow the Spirit Dancer out of range of the Illuminating Lash. Okay, flooding out here quite a bit, which is a bit annoying. But if we do draw another aura, having a second Spirit Dancer here is pretty nice. It also does provide us with some insulation against Shieldred's Edict if they do get up to 5 mana. Wonder if they play the Barragoyf here. I mean, Barragoyf shouldn't be too big. Oh, they drew Fatal Push off the top, which is a bit annoying. But that does deny the Goyf this turn. Okay, Sheltered by Ghosts. So I think we've just got to go for that here, right? Again, it grows the Spirit Dancer out of range of the Illuminating Lash. They're still 2 mana away from Shieldred's Edict, so we don't need to worry about that next turn at the very least. See if they have instant speed removal here. And we draw another creature. That's really important because I think they're pretty likely to draw another land if they crack a clue here, right? Then they get 2 draws at another land. Yes, they do crack a clue. And that then means that we can hopefully get Doorkeeper Thrull in play in response to the Shieldred's Edict to kind of blow them out that way. Okay, there is the Barragoyf, which is a bit of a concern. Okay, Thought Partition. Wow, Invert Polarity. That's not a card I've seen in a while. I mean, I think I'm just going to take the Barragoyf here. Pyrogoyf, you're only making it 1 more mana expensive. And unfortunately, because they're 1 mana away, I don't think we could put Lurrus into hand. If I was confident they wouldn't draw a land here, then I think we could, but we want to hold this Doorkeeper Thrull to play in response to Shieldred's Edict. Obviously, we can't block here. We could have obviously flashed in the Doorkeeper Thrull to block, but again, if they have the 5th land for Shieldred's Edict, we basically just lose on the spot. Wow, Snapcaster and Shieldred's Edict. I mean, Doorkeeper Thrull can shut off the Snapcaster Mage, which is pretty big. And they don't currently have enough mana to go Snapcaster, Fatal Push, and pay the ward. Okay, they don't actually have the 5th land yet, so I think we can safely go Doorkeeper Thrull here because, like I said, the opponent doesn't have enough mana to go Snapcaster plus Fatal Push. They can obviously use Illuminating Lash next turn to kill the Doorkeeper Thrull, but then they don't have enough mana to do that plus the Shieldred's Edict. Wow, they invert Polarity. And that actually works out better for us because it's in play, which means it cuts them off Pyrogoyf and Snapcaster's ETB. Ethereal Armor is also nice because it means we can kind of stonewall the Barragoyf. And since, you know, they're mainly reliant on Shieldred's Edict, I'm going to cast the Shard Mage's Rescue now. And we draw another creature, which is absolutely huge here. So, whoops, I don't think we want to attack here, right? Because they'll just chump block with the Doorkeeper Thrull, and then that turns on Snapcaster Mage, it turns on Pyrogoyf. So I think we just want to run out the Light Pause here. If they do draw the 5th land, we can sacrifice the Light Pause to the Shieldred's Edict. They can't attack with the Barragoyf. The Doorkeeper Thrull that's in play is shutting off the Snapcaster Mage and the Pyrogoyf. So I actually think we're navigating this pretty well so far. We'll see. They could obviously play another Barragoyf here. Or they could just go for the Shieldred's Edict. I mean, yeah, they can use Illuminating Lash here to take out the Light Pause, which then opens up the possibility of using Shieldred's Edict next turn. But we now have 6 mana, so we can just put Lurrus into hand and cast it immediately. And then obviously if we draw enough auras here to go for lethal, we can just do that instead. Okay, we do draw Light Pause, so I'm going to put Lurrus into hand and I think just cast the Light Pause here because they're clearly trying to set up for Shieldred's Edict to take out the Spirit Dancer here. And they can't use Snapcast the Mage because of Doorkeeper Thrull, right? If they didn't have the Doorkeeper Thrull in play, they could go Snapcast a Fatal Push. Maybe they don't realise that. And then we don't have to worry about the Shieldred's Edict going forwards, because if they Shieldred's Edict here, we sack the Light Pause. If they hold on to it, we can go Lurrus into another creature, or, you know, start getting enough auras from the graveyard to go for lethal. So, I feel pretty confident about this. I think them keeping the Doorkeeper Thrull in play has made a massive difference here, though, because, again, shuts off their Pyrogoyf in this spot as well, so... Okay, Demonic Ruckus. So, I think we just try and set up lethal for the Spirit Dancer first here, because we still have enough mana to go for Lurrus if we run out of gas. Okay, Ethereal Armor's nice, but we'll obviously get, I think, Griff Spoon on the Light Pause, and then... You know, we can attack with both. I mean, this is going to be more than lethal anyway, so... Yeah, Thought Partition was really crucial here, not just in terms of delaying that Shieldred's Edict, which would have been brutal if we hadn't got it, but also just in terms of getting information about the opponent's hands so that we know what we're playing around. And then, yeah, I think that's all the auras out of the deck, but we can just attack with both, and that should be more than enough for lethal here. So yeah, we got there, nice. So opponent is playing quite an interactive deck. I definitely think, I mean, Doorkeeper Thrull does seem decent, but I think I'm going to swap out the Adanto Vanguard here because I think they are more likely to bring in spot removal. Oh, I should have brought in Rest in Peace as well, I think. You know, typically I'm so used to not bringing in Rest in Peace against Dimir. Typically against Dimir, my kind of ethos with that is if they're not running a number of cards that are built around the graveyard, like if they were running, for example... Barrow Goyf, Snapcaster Mage, and Treasure Cruise, then I'd definitely consider bringing in Rest in Peace. But yeah, I definitely should have brought in Rest in Peace in this matchup because it shuts off Snapcaster Mage, it shuts off their Goyfs, and it makes swapping Doorkeeper Thrull for Adanto Vanguard even better because those are the two main cards that we need to worry about their ETBs for. So yeah, I think if this goes to a game 3, I should bring in the Rest in Peace. So definitely going to keep this. We've got the option of Thought Partition or Demonic Ruckus on turn 1. Do have slightly too many lands, so I'm going to use the Vista here to thin my deck of lands a little bit. Plus, you never know on ladder. Some people might be running Stifle or something. Okay. I mean, I think I'm going to take the Shieldred's Edict here. I think there's a decent chance they might just jam Psychic Frog here rather than going for Thoughtseize. Okay, they don't go for Thoughtseize, which is huge. And now we can get the Adanto Vanguard down. And they still don't have mana to cast Psychic Frog yet anyway, so... Yeah, getting the Vanguard down should be pretty big. Unless they draw another Shieldred's Edict, obviously. But if they don't, I think, you know, Vanguard should be pretty good against the majority of interaction that they tend to run. So opponent Thoughtseizes here, I imagine they take the Sheltered by Ghosts. Oh, interesting. They take the Ethereal Armor. So I think because I would rather use the Sheltered by Ghost to take out a Psychic Frog or a Barrow Goyf, I'm just going to use the Demonic Ruckus here. Not to mention if they do happen to draw Toxic Deluge or Shieldred's Edict, we do get to then draw a card when the Adanto Vanguard dies, which is really nice. Right, it will hopefully get us closer to another creature anyway. So attack with the Tamiyo. See if they find their third land for the Barrow Goyf or not. I mean, even if they do, we've got Sheltered by Ghosts immediately to be able to answer it, which is huge. Wow, they play a tap land and they don't play the Barrow Goyf. So I'm going to play the Sunbaked Canyon first because I want to be able to play around Spell Pierce, and I also want to be able to crack the Sunbaked Canyon during the opponent's end step. That way we play around discard spells a little bit better. I'm kind of baffled why they didn't play the Barrow Goyf here, though. Unless they have a board sweeper. If they have like a Toxic Deluge, then it makes sense, but I don't get why they wouldn't just go Steam Vents into Barrow Goyf here. I guess it doesn't make a massive difference here because we've got Menace and we can obviously give the Adanto Vanguard Indestructible to stop it from attacking. So maybe that's why. Maybe they just want to keep drawing lands until they can cast the Shieldred's Edict on 5 potentially, which is also why I really wanted to get the Sunbaked Canyon in play here, because we really want to try and find another creature quickly here so that we don't end up losing this Vanguard to Shieldred's Edict on turn 5. But yeah, if that's the opponent's logic, they want to get to 5 mana for the Shieldred's Edict, then I think it does make sense what they've done there, but if we can then find another creature before they can get to that, then that kind of nullifies their game plan there. Not to mention if we find more auras, we should be good. Okay, we found a Light Pause, that's huge, and that does provide us with some protection for the Vanguard. So I think we're kind of forced to play the Light Pause here regardless. It would kind of suck if they have a Fatal Push in hand, because then they can Fatal Push the Light Pause, potentially draw their 5th land, and then use the Shieldred's Edict on the Adanto Vanguard. But even then, we've still got Lurrus as a backup, so not the end of the world. And that is kind of the worst case scenario from this point, I think. But yeah, we'll see what they've got. Maybe they just crack another land here to try and get the Edict off, but having a second creature in play here is big for that. Oh no, there is the Fatal Push. Okay, so this could be it. If they draw the 5th land, we lose the Vanguard, they get back the Tamiyo, and then we're kind of reliant on Lurrus. So really hope they miss their 5th land here. Oh, it's a tap land. I guess that's the cost you pay for running Grixis rather than just straight Dimir or Izzet. So now they'll presumably attack him with the Psychic Frog. Maybe they need to hold it back to block though. Yeah, I guess they do. And there's another Shelter by Ghost, so that should be it, right? We can Shelter by Ghost, get rid of the Barrow Goyf, put the extra land in play to play around Spell Pierce, which is the only thing that really saves them here, I think. Well, if we didn't have the 2 mana. But yeah, now we Shelter by Ghost, get rid of the Barrow Goyf. They can't chump with the Psychic Frog because we have Menace, and we got there nice. So that felt pretty good. Looks like the opponent was on a super interactive deck as well, and I sideboarded wrong, so yeah, that felt good to get there. Okay, so we're going second here. And, I mean, this is close to a mulligan, but I don't really think I can afford to throw away any hand, especially in the dark, that has a creature and auras. Okay, turn 1 Thoughtseize is the exact thing I didn't want to see, but at least we have the lands to be able to fetch Lurrus if we need. And I feel like it's probably best to not have to spend 2 life on the Sacred Foundry rather than thinning my deck slightly. Wow, we're flooding out here. Looks like the opponent's on Jund as well, which is a tricky enough matchup game 1. So they do Thoughtseize again, but thankfully they did it before we put Lurrus into hand. You know, I'd have been more concerned if they waited until we put Lurrus into hand. But I guess they could always have another Thoughtseize here, which would be pretty brutal, but we'll see what they've got. So yeah, flooding out here pretty badly, which is not great when we kept a speculative, quite land-heavy hand in the first place. Okay, there's Pyrogoyf. I mean, they are using all of their discard spells and potential creature removal early. Wow, another land. That's pretty rough. I mean, thankfully we can at least... Oh, maybe I shouldn't have... Yeah, I shouldn't have used my fetch to buff the Pyrogoyf there either. But at least we can go Hammer Hand on Lurrus, get in and gain ourselves a little bit of life here. But yeah, pretty rough to just keep drawing so many lands here. There's Barrow-Goyf. I mean, I'll give myself another draw step just in case we draw a Light Pause, but... Oh wow, Tarmogoyf as well. Okay, I don't think there's anything that can save us here, but... We'll see. I'll give myself one more draw step, but yeah. We can crack the Sunbaked Canyon as well, but yeah, very unlikely that we survive here. I mean, we do draw a Core Spirit Dancer, but the opponent's hand was pretty explosive, and we also kept a pretty speculative hand there. So, if I'd known I was against Jund, I don't know, if I known against Jund, you don't really want to mulligan it anyway, but yeah, definitely, yeah. Okay, so opponent attacks me with everything. We do lose game 1 there, a bit unfortunate. But having said that, I think that's kind of expected against Jund. I think the matchup does get a lot better post-sideboard. Going to cut the Thrull and the Thought Partition and bring in the Adanto Vanguard and Rest in Peace. And hopefully the matchup should improve post-sideboard because, you know, like I said, outside of Dismember and Shieldred's Edict and Toxic Deluge, they don't really have many good ways to deal with Adanto Vanguard, and Rest in Peace is so good against the rest of their deck as well. So this is a matchup that does improve quite a lot post-sideboard. But yeah, obviously still a tricky matchup to navigate for sure. Okay, so game 2, obviously being on the play here is going to be a pretty big advantage. And that's nice. We find Rest in Peace and we have redundancy for Light Pause as well here. So we should be able to play through Thoughtseize way better than we did last game. Going to lead on the Prismatic Vista, crack it. That will thin our deck out slightly. And then hopefully the opponent doesn't have Thoughtseize because I'd love to run out Rest in Peace here. Okay, they do Thoughtseize and I imagine they take Rest in Peace. Unless they have one piece of spot removal and they won't be able to deal with the second Light Pause. Okay, they do take the Light Pause, so that must mean to me that they have only one piece of spot removal. But either way, I'm definitely going to take the opportunity to get Rest in Peace in play here. Because that is going to shut off a lot of their proactive game plan. Oh, they do have another Thoughtseize, so we do lose both Light Pause, but since we still have Lurrus as kind of a backup, I'm actually not too bothered because Rest in Peace should be really good against their proactive game plan, like I said. I feel like it's not really worth hiding information just to take extra damage here. Okay, Adanto Vanguard's a really nice draw. Unless they happen to have Shieldred's Edict, I actually think this is a pretty decent card to have in this spot because we can then get Demonic Ruckus on it and then potentially Ethereal Armor as well. Oh, wow. They did have Shieldred's Edict. Yikes. Okay, that's pretty rough. I mean, at least we still have Lurrus. And if they are reliant on Fatal Push, it's going to be tricky for them to trigger Revolt without, Prismatic Vista or a spawn token from Malevolent Rumble. So here I think I'm going to go for the Ethereal Armor because if they do have another Thoughtseize, I'd much rather have the first strike on Lurrus rather than Vigilance. Now, Sentinel's Eyes being reusable can be useful in this matchup, but obviously not under Rest in Peace because it'll get exiled straight away. Wow, Heritage Reclamation, okay. I mean, I guess that does the same thing that an Abrupt Decay would. And then they cycle Proving Ground. So I think the game plan here is just load up the Lurrus and hope they don't have more removal because they have used quite a lot of their interaction already. And like I said, if they are reliant on Fatal Push, then it's going to be tricky to get Revolt unless they happen to draw a Rumble or a Vista here. Okay, there's Fear of Missing Out, which obviously, they've got access to their graveyard now. Oh, wow, there's the Rumble. Really hope they don't have a Fatal Push here. But that could very easily get Delirium online, which it does for the Fear of Missing Out. And then they do have Thoughtseize in the graveyard, but if they do that, it puts them down to 6 and leaves them very vulnerable to a Lurrus attack, especially if we find another aura off the top or off this Sunbaked Canyon. So even though, in most spots it's probably correct to use the Thoughtseize just to get Jarsel up to 2, I think the opponent probably did make the right play just to preserve their life total here. So we crack the Sunbaked Canyon, really hope to find another aura. And if they don't have crack the spawn into Fatal Push, Griff's Boon should actually get us here. Or it should get us over the line here, I think. Wow, okay, we got there, nice. So yeah, Shieldred's Edict, the fact the opponent is running it is a bit annoying for the Adanto Vanguard, but again, it's not as bad as stuff like Toxic Deluge or Dismember because we can play around it, right? If we go Esper Sentinel on 1 into Adanto Vanguard on 2, that does insulate us from Shieldred's Edict. Same thing with our other creatures as well, so having to mulligan a 7 because of no lands is pretty rough, especially in this matchup. Wow, having to go down to 5 is rough. But we do have 2 of the best cards in the matchup, right? So I think I'm going to put back the Vista and probably the Sunbaked Canyon here because we don't want to take unnecessary damage if we can avoid it. But Rest in Peace and Adanto Vanguard is pretty nice here. Okay, opponent does have Thoughtseize when we're down to 5, so That is pretty annoying. But again, we do have 2 really good cards, so as long as they don't have a second Thoughtseize here, I do think we've got a chance. Okay, they go for the Rest in Peace, and we do find a Spirit Dancer off the top, which is pretty nice. But again, if the opponent just passes with mana open, and even if they don't, I think it makes more sense to go for the Vanguard. Although again, it does leave us vulnerable to Shieldred's Edict a little bit. Wow, another Thoughtseize. Double Thoughtseize on a Malta 5 is pretty rough. And they take the Vanguard, so that now means that Spirit Dancer is going to be vulnerable to Fatal Push, obviously. So we could obviously go for the Esper Sentinel, but I think I'm just going to go for the Spirit Dancer. Because I do want to get to 3 lands to put Lurrus into hand here. Wouldn't surprise me if they do have the Fatal Push. Wow, yeah, there's the push. So opponent's hand is lined up very well against ours, and we were on a Malta 5, so... But the opponent is also missing land drops, so... And we do draw another Spirit Dancer. I was going to put Lurrus into hand, but I think it makes more sense to get both of these down, because then an Aura off the top can start chaining them together with Spirit Dancer here. There's Jostle, though. I mean, we do get to draw a card off the Esper Sentinel here, but... Okay, we do draw another Sentinel, which isn't bad. Oh, and Rest in Peace. Okay, that's a nice pickup. And this is why I really like running 4, because even if the opponent removes one, having a backup is so important in this matchup, right? It shuts them off Jostle value. If they have Pyrogoyfs or Barogoyfs in hand, that completely shuts those down as well. There we go, shuts down Rumble. And we get to draw a card off the Sentinel as well, potentially, so... Okay, so they do find another land, and it does provide them with more red sources as well. We are flooding out a little bit, but we do get to get Lurrus into our hand for free here, basically. But yeah, Rest in Peace should buy us enough time, hopefully, right? That's the really great thing about the card in this matchup is... Oh no, if they're cracking the Spawn token, that probably means Culling Ritual's coming, though. Yikes. Okay, there's the Culling Ritual. We do get to draw a card off the Esper Sentinel. But yeah, the opponent's interaction is lined up against us very well this game. Well, they give us 2 cards. So that must mean they've got something to cast for 5 mana total. Okay, there's Barogoyf. Maybe they got a Rumble as well. Oh, weird. I don't know why they gave us an extra card there. There's Light Pause, though. So, I think I'm going to go for Light Pause plus Ethereal Armor here, and then this should hopefully stop the Barogoyf from attacking. And now that... and I'm going to go for Sentinel's Eyes here as well, because if it does get taken out, that's a really nice reusable aura. You know, now Rest in Peace isn't in play anymore. We can start looping it if we need. And also giving Light Pause Vigilance means we can attack and still have it back on defense against the Barogoyf. Okay, so I'm definitely going to lead on cracking the Sunbaked Canyon here. Right, if we can find more auras, we can potentially start closing the game out a lot more quickly. That does grow the Barogoyf slightly, but we should still be good to attack in here, and then we can just run out the Lurrus. And then, even if the Light Pause dies, if they don't have a removal spell for Lurrus, we can start recasting stuff. So still in this game, even though the opponent's early interaction did line up pretty well against us. Well, flooding out a little bit again. Going to use the basic mountain to crack the Sunbaked Canyon here. Wow, didn't find anything. But we can keep attacking it. It looks like the opponent's kind of stuck here as well. Trying to think what they could have in hand. And I'm definitely going to set stops during the opponent's turn just to represent Shard Mage's rescue here. Yeah, I wonder what the opponent could have here. I mean, I think... It doesn't look like they had removal during their turn. Well, I'm going to crack the Vista first just to see if they get priority. If they get priority, I think I'm going to hold on to the Shard Mage's rescue. But if this goes immediately, yeah, opponent doesn't have priority, so we should be good to go if they don't have anything, if they're not bluffing. We go Shard Mage's rescue on the Light Pause, get Hammerhand, make the Barogoyf not able to block, and we can set up lethal here. So, wow, we managed to get there. That felt pretty good.